All right, well, good afternoon. Once again, I'm Layla Shahidel, Project Director of Wake Tech's Finish First and See initiative. Finish First and See is a high impact, high volume, low resource, and low cost solution for student success and completion. And we are delighted to bring you another partner support webinar today. Now, the purpose of the partner support webinars is to provide technical support and helpful information as you're implementing the Finish First and See data tool and process. In the first part of today's webinar, we'll be highlighting a Finish First and See partner college, Guilford Tech Community College, to hear how they're using the FFNC program. And then after that, we'll have a brief period of time where we'll stick around and be around to answer any questions that you might have about using the Finish First and See tool or implementing it. We want to encourage you to ask any question that you might have without hesitation. It could be that somebody else has that same question, so we do want to make sure that you are encouraged to ask any questions that you might have about using or implementing Finish First and See. Now that second part, the question and answer segment, is optional. So if you'd only like to remain for the first part, you're welcome to enjoy the first part of the webinar and then excuse yourself after the end. And we'll have a designated space for questions after that, but at any point you can put your question in the comment box if you'd like to, and we'll get to that as soon as we can. Now, before we get started, I will share a few announcements and housekeeping items. Now, I want to remind everyone that you can run Finish First and See for your registration periods if you've not done so yet for the summer and or the fall 2022 semesters to advise your current students about courses to register for in order to receive a credential after those semesters. And be sure to update your transcript and former report file for students who are active in this current semester, and also be sure to update the graduates file to include students who have completed programs through the fall 2021 term. And be sure to also pull the student information or the student demographic file and the Pell recipient file, updating those for students in the current semester. As far as exclusions go, when you run the Finish First and See tool, it'll prompt you to enter the number of semesters you want excluded. If your registration period, for some reason at this point in the semester, has not yet started, then you would enter 0 when prompted, 0 semesters. If your registration for only the fall semester has started, when prompted, you would enter 1 semester, that is the summer 2022 semester. And if your registration for both the summer and the fall semester have started when prompted, you'll enter 2 semesters, the summer and the fall 2022 semesters. And the near completion output file will show you the students close to completion, close to completing the courses and the courses that they have remaining to take in order to earn the evaluated credential. And you can also use this as an advising tool to then encourage the students to enroll in the courses needed column during the registration periods. Now we are in the middle of our semester data collection period. The deadline for submitting your college's data to us is today. So I want to remind you to share your college's impact data, feedback, suggestions, comments, advice that you have with us using the forms that were emailed to the primary and secondary points of contact on March 17th. We're collecting data, of course, for the fall 2021 semester. And please submit your forms to Jennifer Nicholson, our data analyst, one of our data analysts on our team, by today. If you need more time, then send her an email and just let her know. And the good news is, just by running the Finish First and See data tool, a lot of the numeric data will automatically be populated for you just by running the tool. And if you missed a walkthrough of the webinar that we had a few weeks ago where we reviewed the form, let me know if you'd like to have a recording of that, and I'd be happy to send it to you. And if for some reason you can't locate the forms in your email, let us know also, and we'll be happy to send it to you. All right, so we have another partner support webinar scheduled for next month. We'll be highlighting how users from Gaston College use Finish First and See. And I really enjoy these spotlight sessions. I know y'all have given us feedback to let us know that you enjoy these too. It gives us a chance to learn about how others around the state are using the Finish First and See tool and their process for implementation. And if you would like to be featured and have your college highlighted in one of the sessions, let me know, and we'd be glad to hear from you and learn from your successes and any other information you want to share with your colleagues, our colleagues around the state. And if you have suggestions for future webinar topics, we're also very open to that. We'd love to hear that from you, so let us know as well. Now, we've been working and having conversations about the sustainability of Finish First and See beyond the current funding period, and we're interested in getting some feedback from you that we might be able to share with stakeholders involved in these conversations. So I might be reaching out to some of you in the near future about gathering your feedback about that. And in the meantime, if there's anything that you'd like to share with us, anything that your staff or folks from your college are interested in sharing with us, please let me know. Now, we are recording this webinar, so as long as we have no technical issues, I will share that link with everyone who has attended or signed up for the webinar. And I'll also share a brief survey to get your feedback on it. I'd love for you to complete it. We do read the feedback on the surveys for the webinar. So whatever information you want to share with us or feedback that you want to share with us, definitely let us know. And lastly, I just want to ask that you would please mute your microphones unless you are engaging. We want to make sure that you have the chance to engage. We encourage your engagement, but if you're not speaking, I do want to ask that you mute your microphones to make sure that we can all get the full benefit of the webinar. Okay, so with that, I'm going to transition. Let me stop sharing my screen. And again, I'm just so glad to have our users from Guilford Technical Community College here. Guilford Tech, excuse me, Guilford is located in Jamestown, North Carolina, and they adopted Finish First in the spring of 2021. And since then, we've really seen how they have had a lot of great impacts from Finish First and seeing what they've shared with us. And we're really able to just take the tool and implement it and hit the ground running with it. So I'm so excited to hear what they have to say, and I know that y'all will enjoy it too. So we're joined today by Kristen Fowler, who is Records Completion Specialist at Guilford Tech. And once again, there will be some space at the end for questions, but if you have any along the way, put them in the chat box or use the raise your hand feature and we'll get to them as soon as we can. So Kristen, I will hand it over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me good?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I have to share my screen first. All right. I think we're good. Hi, as Layla said, I'm Kristen Fowler, I'm completion specialist here at GTCC, and also on the call today is Keith Carricker. He's our registrar. The completion specialist position was created in part due to Finish First. We wanted to be able to really use all of the data in the best way that we could. So we needed someone that could really focus on the data and really work through all the workflows and how we were going to use it. So we created a position pretty much specifically for Finish First. But in our webinar today, have the agenda, just a brief introduction to GTCC, in case you aren't familiar with us. Briefly go over our graduation process before Finish First and how we implemented Finish First and how that graduation process changed. I'll go over how we process new completions and our near completions. And then my favorite part, our impact on our graduation numbers, which have been amazing, and future uses and what we plan on using Finish First for. And then we'll have some questions at the end. So general information about GTCC. We're located in Guilford County. We have multiple locations. Our Jamestown campus is our main campus, and that includes the Center for Advanced Manufacturing building. We have campuses in High Point and Greensboro. We have our aviation campus that has 3 locations near the airport, the Cameron campus over in Colfax, and the Small Business Center and Union Square buildings that are also in Greensboro. We offer over 80 programs of study, leading to associate's certificates and diplomas. And our enrollment for the fall was 9,988. So before Finish First, our graduation process was that students had to print out a packet, then they had to go see their advisor. Their advisor signed off on that application. Then they had to take that packet to the cashier's office, pay a $35 graduation fee. The cashier signed off on it, and then they had to turn that paperwork in to the records office. That resulted in multiple barriers, and we just weren't seeing the graduation numbers that we wanted. A lot of our students were e-degree, so they weren't on campus, so they had trouble actually getting here to see an advisor. And then a lot of our students had trouble paying that $35 graduation fee because it had to be paid out of pocket. It wasn't something that could be paid through financial aid. And it was just a high fee for something right at the end of the semester. And in the age of COVID, that was 3 points of contact that you didn't want. That's 3 different offices that a student had to visit in person with a piece of paper that was being handed off. So it just wasn't a good process after COVID either. So to remove those barriers, we did a couple of different things. We eliminated the requirement for students to get a signature from their advisor. We still highly recommend that they do see their advisor before they do a graduation application, but it's not a requirement. If we get the form and there are issues noted, we'll let their advisor know at that time. We eliminated the $35 graduation fee, and we replaced that with a $5 student success fee that is charged as part of tuition. That made it a lot easier for students to pay because that could be paid through financial aid, and it wasn't a fee that they had to come up with all at one time. And then we created an online graduation form. Right now it's a PDF that they have to email to the records office, but we're hoping to get that completely online soon. And yeah, so we removed all of these barriers, but the problem was even after removing the barriers, we still had students that didn't apply to graduate. And a large part of that was students felt like if they weren't attending the ceremony, that they didn't have to do the application. And the problem with that was they would go on to transfer or to go work, and then they would come back needing verification of their degree, and they would have never graduated because at the time we had to have a graduation application in order to get them graduated. So we weren't seeing the graduation numbers that we knew were there, and students weren't getting credit for what they earned. So we implemented an auto graduation process, and that would pick up any students that had completed a credential but never applied. But our process only picked up students that were active in the program. And that was a big help because for those students that either just completely forgot about the form or didn't fill out the form because they weren't going to go to the ceremony, we were still able to get credit for that completion and then get that completion in the system. So if a student ordered a transcript or needed an education verification, it was actually in, so they were getting credit for what they needed. In order to catch all of the stackable credentials, all of the certificates that are underneath associate's degrees or diplomas, those programs had to be added to the student's account. And that created a problem with our completion rates because if a student stopped attending before they even got any of those degrees, it just resulted in multiple programs being reported as incomplete. One of the processes for our aviation program was the students would, when they applied under the associate's degree, we would go ahead and add all of the certificates as well so that they would be awarded. So if they stopped, that was 4 programs that were being reported as incomplete as compared to just 1. So when we implemented Finish First, the good part of that was we still had that graduation application and the auto graduation process, but Finish First allowed us to identify students that were never active in a program. And so for the spring, we had a very large number initially. We had 852 new completions that we were able to graduate. For the summer, we had 186, and for the fall, we had 515. And those are not including what we normally would graduate with our graduation application and the auto graduation process. So these were completely new credentials that without Finish First would have never been awarded at all. And the only difference between someone who did a graduation application and either the students that did the auto graduation or the new completions is if they did the application, we would go ahead and print and mail their degree because we would have an active, or we would have a good mailing address. For the others, we would wait until they did a degree print form to actually mail the degree out. But all of that was free. All of the mailing and all of that is covered with that $5 student success fee. So these were large numbers that we were just missing, even with all of our efforts that we had, that without Finish First, we would have never been able to get. And with Finish First, we're now able to catch all of the stackable credentials without having to add these programs to a student's account. So for that aviation example, we could just admit the student into the aviation associate's degree. And as they finish those certificates, finish first will catch them and we can graduate them then without having to add those to a student's account ahead of time. We're also able to advise students who are near completion, which is something that without Finish First, we wouldn't have been able to do. The automation part of Finish First is amazing because it catches all of these just running the program. To try to do that manually with our enrollment number and the amount of programs that we had, it just would have been impossible. So Finish First has definitely helped us a lot with this. And then, as I said before, we created the completion specialist position to help create the workflows and manage the FFNC data. This was completely new, so we had to kind of take what we wanted to do with the data and actually make it work. And those workflows are still evolving based on feedback that we get from staff, faculty, and from students. So we're still working everything out and trying to make it as successful as possible. So when we process our new completions, I wait until after the withdrawal date, and then I'll add those programs to the accounts of new completers, and we don't require them to submit program change forms. I wait till after the withdrawal date because that gives me a better idea of who's actually going to complete that degree, or at least attempt to complete that degree. And then once the grades are in, the new completers are graduated. We don't require a graduation application, but they are notified by email, and they're given the option to complete a degree print form to have their degree printed and mailed to them. So that's the only difference between them and someone who did a graduation application, is we just don't want to mail it out to an incorrect address. We wait for them to tell us what their correct address is. And I run the new completions every spring, summer, and fall. Our near completions, these take a little bit longer and are a little bit more involved. And I only run these for the spring and for the fall. A lot of our students don't take summer classes, or they just take their gen eds through the summer. So it's kind of hard to run near completions through the summer. So we just run them through the spring and fall. And when I pull that file, I modify it to include the student's advisor's name and their email address, and if the student is currently active in the program. And to do that, I use different Informer reports, and I merge that with the data that we got from FFNC. And that was done based on feedback that we had from staff and faculty and students, because the communications that students get tell them to see their advisor if they have any questions about adding those classes or adding the program. And a lot of times students don't know who their advisor is, or if that advisor is an adjunct faculty member, sometimes finding their contact information can be difficult. So having that advisor's name and the email address actually on the communication that we send out makes it more likely that a student will actually follow through. They don't have to hunt for the information. And then one thing we noticed when we first did the communications was we didn't list if the student was in that program or not. So we had a lot of students emailing back asking if they were in that program, or had they ever been in that program. They were just confused. So now the communications are split. Students that are in the program are emailed one thing, and students that aren't are emailed another thing with a different list of instructions. And that just reduced some confusion that students were having because they weren't sure if they had added that program previously or not. And then once I get all of that data put together, I review it and edit it to include course substitutions. Finish First pulls off of what's in our catalog, not from colleague. So if there's course substitutions that we've done previously, Finish First can't recognize those. But there is that column for courses not being used, and that definitely helps and to determine which students might actually have course substitutions that could be done or may have been done already. And that's another thing of that column that I add of if they're in that currently active in the program or not. Because if they're already in the program, I know that there's probably those core subs have probably already been done. So I edit the output to just reflect those core substitutions before I send that communication out to the student. Once I get them as accurate as possible, and this was kind of a collaborative effort from multiple different people on campus, and we kind of tried to come up with the best way to alert students and staff and faculty of their FFNC status if they were close to completing a degree. So we put an FFNC hold on a student's perk screen, and I have hold in quotation marks because it's not really a hold. It doesn't prevent them for anything. It's really just an alert. And we looked at different methods, but this was the method that made the most sense because every advisor has access to the perk screen. Any hold that a student has shows up in multiple different places, so they're more likely to see it. And it helps me to track which students ended up adding the program or registering for classes, because I pull up a list of every student that had that FFNC hold, and then I can look to see maybe did they add the classes that we suggested, did they end up completing the program or not, and that seems to be the best way that we've been able to track these. This is an example of the hold that's in their perk screen. If a faculty or staff member drills in to the FFNC hold, this is the note that they see. And this is just copied straight from the output from Finish First. One thing that's not in this example is I've added a note beside the program that says if the student's in the program or not. And that was a suggestion from a staff member that would be helpful for advisors to know if the student might potentially need to do a program change or if this was something they were already pursuing. And I do add notes at the end if there are core subs that might need to be done or that could be done, especially if the student's not in the program where there's core subs I can't do ahead of time. Just to let an advisor know that if a student does pursue that those things would need to be done for them or sent off to a department chair. And the feedback that I've gotten so far has been that this note has been very helpful. We do send emails out to the students letting them know about their status being near completion, but they don't always read their email. So sometimes the first they hear about it is when a staff member sees that note in perk and then tells them about it. And then that starts a conversation with an advisor about whether or not adding that program would be beneficial to them and what kind of classes are left. And then they can talk to their advisor about that. So a summary of our processes is the new completions are run 3 times a year after the withdrawal date, fall, spring, and summer. And then near completions are run 2 times a year in May and June for the fall registration, and in August, and that should be September. We run in August and September for the spring registrations. And the old FFNC notes and perk are ended before the new notes are added to reduce confusion and provide accurate information. And I think the next slide, yeah, this is my favorite one. It's very rare when you start any process that you get instant results. Most of the time when you start something new, you have to wait a couple semesters to see if it's actually beneficial or if it had the impact that you wanted. With Finish First, it was instant. So we started Finish First in the spring of 2021, and you can see that it increased just from fall 2020 to 2021, it increased by 36.5%. which is a large percentage. One thing that our AVP had asked was if these numbers were only because of extra certificates that we were adding, if it was just for supplemental degrees that a student earned while they were getting their associate's degree, or if it actually did impact first-time students. So we also looked at unduplicated head counts by the highest degree earned, And even that was an increase. So if they had been awarded an associate's degree, this didn't count their diplomas or certificates that were underneath that associate's degree. So even from that, there was still an increase. So from the 19-20 school year, it was a 19.5% increase. And from the 18-19 school year, it was a 10.5% increase. So no matter how you look at the data, it was a large impact just from Finish First, because we had been doing the auto graduation and reducing the barriers to graduation before Finish First, and we still weren't getting those high numbers. So a lot of this was strictly due to Finish First. And then our future uses, we plan on using Finish First to award all stackable credentials. So we plan on not trying to we're reducing the number of programs that a student has on their account. So not adding all of the certificates and diplomas ahead of time and letting Finish First catch them as students complete those. And then we recently looked at identifying students that are close to completing a degree but are not currently active. And to do that, we had our IT staff modify the transcript report that we pull. So we went back for 5 years, and any students that were active at any point within 5 years but were not currently active this semester. And then we cross-referenced that list with the clearinghouse and eliminated any students that had already completed a degree with another institution or were already currently enrolled elsewhere. And then we also removed anyone that had already completed a degree with us. And that left a very large list that we have 2 re-engagement specialists that are going to be working on different ways to contact these students and hopefully assist them in completing their credentials. And we hope that that's successful. We're still in the process of figuring out our communication methods, but it's just one way that we can use Finish First in additional ways that we weren't looking at before. But just seeing the results that we had for our currently active students, we're hoping that looking at students that aren't currently active, that it will still have those same results. All that I have, so we can open it up for questions, Layla, if you need to.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that, Kristen. That's a lot of valuable information. I'm sure that was helpful to folks here listening in. Are there any questions that y'all have for Kristen and the other folks from GTCC who are here with us about their processes and impacts that they've seen? One question that I have as folks are maybe thinking about their own, I'm wondering, Kristen, if you or maybe some of the others here from GTCC can share about what it looked like to go from the site visit, from the Finish First NC team sharing the data tool and our information with y'all to kind of where y'all are now. What was that process to organizing your staff to work with Finish First NC? You know, did you have meetings, or did you? What was kind of that process for y'all to get to where you are now?
So we originally had it was 2 transfer credit evaluators that kind of split up how we were looking at the data. And we really just knew kind of what we wanted it to look like. So we had to meet with the registrar. We met with the director of advising, and kind of all got together about what we would like the data to be used for and what we would like the results to be. And we had to kind of come up with workflows based off of that. We tried different things. We've changed our communications a couple of times just based off of student impact or student feedback and staff feedback if anything was confusing. So we just had to start our workflows and kind of trial and error. And Keith, if you're still there, if you had anything additional. I think that's all that we
were fortunate enough to have input from Finish First crew and also from Diane Davis here in our office to try to get it set up. And it really took a village to get this off the ground, but it's been incredible. And I have to say that Kristen has been amazing because when this position was created, it was completely amorphous, and we just kind of threw her off the deep end. And she has created what needs to happen, and it's been wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I know Diane, and just the few communications that I've had with her, very capable woman. So I'm sure she's real pivotal in helping y'all get it off the ground. Um, Another question I have, and again, if others have questions, definitely chime in, come off of the mic, or unmute your microphone or put your question in the chat box. But you shared a couple of things that we might consider lessons learned, the email communications with the students and splitting those into different segments for their messaging, adding the advisor name and including that right into the email with the students. Are there any other things that you might consider as lessons learned in terms of working with the data tool or working with users across departments to find the successes that you have?
One thing I learned was it was important to try to get the data as accurate as possible with the course substitutions. Because if we just said in our email to contact your advisor if you believe any course substitutions need to be made and that kind of thing, students just got very, very confused. And going through those course substitutions ahead of time just made it a lot easier for students because they had a more accurate idea of what they were looking at. And then for advisors, especially if it wasn't a student's assigned advisor, if it was just an advisor that they just showed up in the Student Success Center, it was just a lot easier for an advisor to look at and have the information as accurate as possible before the student came. That was just something that we thought was very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And also like how you mentioned, putting the finisher's hold, so to speak, on the student's perk screen, that could be visible in different places along the line. I'm sure that has been really helpful for all those involved in the process too.
It was because we originally were going to filter out that list and just send it to an advisor, just send them their students. But the problem was that a lot of our students don't see their assigned advisor. They go and they will see someone in student success, or they'll see a previous instructor that they have a familiarity with. So they'll see them instead. And that advisor would not know that they were close or near completion. And sometimes the student doesn't even know because they didn't see the email. So having that hold was something that no matter who they see, that's something that someone checks.
Yeah. Are there other questions that y'all have for Kristen or Keith or anyone else from GTCC? This is really valuable information that y'all are sharing. Well, if you have questions that you think of, we're going to go to the question and answer segment. I'm going to pause the recording here or stop the recording here, but Kristen will stick around if you do think of other questions. But if you have any along the way, definitely put those in the chat box. So Kristen and Keith, thank you all so much once again for sharing this information. I'm sure it's going to be really helpful to others here who are listening in. So at this point, what we're going to do is transition to the question and answer. It'll just be open for those who might want to ask anything for us. I do have a couple of questions in here that we sometimes get from users along the way. So I'll share those, but the purpose of this next segment is really just to be here on standby in case you have any general or specific questions about Finish First NC. So I'm going to stop our recording here. If you prefer to, go ahead and make your exit, now would be a good time. But if you want to stick around and ask any questions, we welcome and encourage you to do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording.